You are a minor functionary in the labyrinthine corridors of the Vatican, hurrying through the cold stone passageways on a sweltering Roman evening in 1501. The scent of melting wax and old incense hangs heavy in the air, but beneath it, a more carnal perfume of sweat, wine, and expensive oils assaults your senses, turning your stomach with a knot of pious fear. A young woman, her gaze as sharp and piercing as the Pope's own, presides over the scene. This is Lucrezia Borgia, his own daughter, not as a captive, but as a participant in this unholy spectacle. What you are witnessing is not merely papal indiscretion. It is the calculated transformation of the Vatican into a personal fiefdom of pleasure. Then press the like button and subscribe for more journeys into the shadows of the past. And let us know in the comments where you are joining us from. Where sacred oaths were a nightly mockery, where the Pope openly flaunted his mistresses, and where his own offspring were pawns in a deadly game of power and gratification. Renaissance Italy was not just a crucible of artistic genius and intellectual rebirth. It was a maelstrom of political turmoil, a connection that flung open the gates of the church hierarchy. Almost immediately after his election, the papal court became infamous throughout Europe for its opulence, its debauchery, and its utter renunciation of Christian values. The scandal lay not just in the Pope openly cohabiting with a woman young enough to be his granddaughter, but in the fact that he treated her as a queen in all but name. Julia resided in the papal apartments, the unofficial empress of the Vatican, presiding over social functions and wielding immense influence. In return for her companionship, her brother Alessandro was made a cardinal at the unprecedented age of 25. Foreign ambassadors dispatched letters to their sovereigns, their words a mixture of astonishment and revulsion at the scenes they were forced to witness. Even the most cynical and hardened politicians of the Renaissance were aghast at the licentiousness that now defined the heart of the Catholic world. But it was his unique blend of sharp intellect, magnetic charisma, and a complete absence of a moral compass that propelled him through the ranks with breathtaking speed. By 25, he wore the cardinal's scarlet. By 30, he was a titan of Roman politics. And throughout this meteoric ascent, one truth became terrifyingly clear. Rodrigo Borgia would not allow the vows of his office to impede his pursuit of worldly pleasures. The Catholic Church had morphed from a spiritual guide into a temporal power, a player in the grand game of European politics, vying with kings and emperors for dominance. Yet, most clergymen, even those in the highest echelons, maintained a veneer of chastity, their affairs conducted with a degree of discretion. Rodrigo Borgia disdained even this thin pretense of piety. He openly acknowledged his mistresses, proudly paraded his numerous children, and wielded his ecclesiastical power to secure their secular fortunes. When Rodrigo finally seized his ultimate ambition in 1492, becoming pope, through a campaign of bribery and political machination that was audacious even by the corrupt standards of the Renaissance, he brought his entire clan into the heart of the Vatican. The papal apartments were transformed into a sprawling household where his mistresses held court like queens. His children were treated as royalty. And the line between the sacred and the profane was erased entirely. The papal court of the late 15th century was a viper's nest of avarice, conspiracy, and moral decay that made the secular courts of Europe seem like cloisters in comparison. Cardinals bought their red hats with gold. Priests kept mistresses with brazen openness. And the Pope himself was expected to be a military strategist as much as a spiritual leader. As you draw near the apostolic palace, the sounds of revelry, not hymns, but raucous laughter, spirited music, twisting the seat of Christianity into his private dominion while cloaked in the vestments of holy authority. This is the story of how one man's ravenous ambition and insatiable appetites brought the Catholic Church to the brink of self-destruction, birthing scandals so profound they are still whispered with a shudder in the Vatican's shadowed halls 5 centuries on. And the unmistakable moans of earthly pleasure spill from behind the magnificently carved doors depicting scenes from the lives of saints. You hesitate, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. Your hand, trembling, reaches for the heavy bronze handle. You know that the sight beyond will irrevocably taint your soul and shatter your every conception of the holy see's sanctity. The door creaks open, revealing a tableau that would make the most debauched Roman emperor pause. There, on a mountain of silk cushions, is Pope Alexander VI, Christ's supposed vicar on earth, surrounded by a throng of naked courtesans and flushed-faced young men. Golden chalices, meant for the blood of Christ, overflow with wine, as bodies entwine in acts of unspeakable depravity. But the true horror is in the corner of your eye. Rodrigo Borgia, who ascended the papal throne as Alexander VI, did not just bend the rules of the Catholic Church. He obliterated them. Welcome to Dark Ages historian. If you have a fascination for the unvarnished and often brutal truths that history tries to conceal, to comprehend how Rodrigo Borgia became the most corrupt pope in history, we must first immerse ourselves in the world that spawned him. Born in 1431 near Valencia, Spain, Rodrigo was the nephew of Pope Calixtus III. The Catholic Church's mandate of clerical celibacy had long been a principle more breached than observed. The transformation of the Vatican under Alexander VI was not a gradual erosion of principles. It was a sudden, shocking flood of depravity. Alexander's primary mistress during his reign was the stunning Julia Farnese, known throughout Rome as Julia la Bella. But Julia was far from Alexander's only female companion. The Pope maintained what contemporary chroniclers described as a veritable harem of beautiful women, each ensconced in luxurious apartments within the Vatican, all supported by church funds. The apex of this depravity, an event that has echoed in infamy through the centuries, was the Banquet of the Chestnuts in October of 1501. Contemporary accounts, most notably from the papal master of ceremonies Johann Burchard, describe an evening where 50 courtesans were invited to the papal apartments. What began as a harvest festival devolved into an orgy of shocking proportions. Naked women crawled on the floor, gathering chestnuts scattered amongst burning candelabras, while the Pope, his son Cesare, and his daughter Lucrezia looked on. Groomed to be a tool of the Borgia family's ambition, his conscience began to rebel against his father's depraved demands, particularly the procurement of young women for papal entertainments. When Giovanni's reluctance became a liability, he met a mysterious end in 1497, his body pulled from the Tiber. The Protestant Reformation, which would erupt just over a decade later, found fertile ground in the disgust and outrage at the corruption he embodied. Martin Luther's criticisms of the papacy resonated so powerfully because Alexander VI had provided a living, breathing testament to their validity. While officially unsolved, contemporary sources strongly hint at the Pope's involvement in his own son's murder. It is a stark reminder of the corrosive nature of absolute power and the institutional failings that allow such corruption to fester. The systems that enabled his rise, nepotism, simony, and the concentration of unchecked authority, are not relics of a distant past, but ongoing vulnerabilities in institutions of all kinds. Official histories were sanitized, and incriminating documents were sealed away in the Vatican's secret archives, where many remain to this day. However, the physical evidence tells its own story. Restorations of the papal apartments have revealed frescoes and architectural features that confirm the most lurid accounts of Alexander's reign. The evening reportedly concluded with a contest of sexual prowess, with prizes awarded by the Pope himself to those who performed with the most vigor. He is a symbol of the countless lives touched and tainted by Alexander VI's reign. The Pope, who should have been the guardian of Christian morality, became its most enthusiastic destroyer. His legacy is not one of spiritual leadership, but a chilling cautionary tale of what happens when power is divorced from principle. And if you found this exploration as compelling as I did, hit that subscribe button so we can continue to unearth the forgotten stories of the past together. There are many more voices waiting to be heard from the shadows of the Dark Ages. The lives of 3 individuals starkly illustrate the human cost of Alexander's reign of corruption. The first is Julia Farnese, who entered Alexander's orbit as a teenager. Married to a minor nobleman, it soon became clear her true purpose was to serve as the Pope's primary mistress, a role her own husband seemingly condoned. Trapped in a gilded cage within the Vatican, she was a beautiful pawn in Alexander's games of power and lust. The second victim was Giovanni Borgia, Alexander's own son. Perhaps the most tragic figure is Lucrezia Borgia, a name now synonymous with Renaissance depravity, but who was, in reality, one of her father's most exploited victims. Used as a political pawn from childhood, She was married off multiple times to suit her father's shifting alliances. Rumors of an incestuous relationship with her father have persisted for centuries, and while impossible to definitively prove, the obsessive nature of his control over her is well documented when Alexander VI died in August of 1503, possibly from poison. A wave of relief, not mourning, swept across Europe. The Church's response was to initiate an elaborate cover-up. The story of Alexander VI is more than just a tale of historical debauchery. Return with me one last time to that young functionary, standing in the doorway of the papal apartments, his faith shattered by the scene before him. If this descent into the dark annals of history has whetted your appetite for more hidden truths, click on the video now appearing on your screen for another shocking chapter that has been obscured by the mists of time.